Okay. And I've hit record, so we're good to go. I'm Lee Kelso, host of the Health Call Live radio hour, and I am glad you're here as we learn more about being a better health information consumer online. Gosh, the past several years, it seems like in the past few years, really, there has been just an explosion of health information on the internet. YouTube channels like this one. Can you trust the information that's out there for you? So I did a little reading on this and reached out to someone who has been writing a lot about health information over the years. And I want to introduce you to Sarah Bradley. She is a freelance health writer. You may have read her published in a number of different websites. We'll show you some of those a little bit later today. But Sarah, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Lee.
Yeah, you bet. This is an area of concern. I mean, my gosh, COVID misinformation and health information in general is a big question. What do you think is important for people to know about the information that they're finding online?
So I think it's important to know that a lot of it is accurate. A lot of it has been well-researched, has been contributed to by experts in the field. For COVID, obviously that's infectious disease specialists, epidemiologists, people like that. And a lot of it has been vetted through the editorial process as well by the editors of these different publications. A lot of it is medically reviewed by doctors that those publications hire to do that process for them before something goes to publication. But there's also a good amount of it that doesn't meet those standards.
Well, let's jump in right away here with how I found you. So you wrote an article for a piece on a condition called Nocturia. The headline was, "What Causes Nocturia? 13 Reasons You're Constantly Getting Up to Pee at Night." So that caught my attention, that kind of information. And as I started reading through the article and looking more deeply, I found that you write an awful lot of content. So let's use this as an example. How did you get this assignment? How did you research it? And what do you want people to take away from this article?
So the editors of health are editors that I've worked with before on previous articles. And so the editor reached out to me and said, I have a series of articles about Nocturia and about some of the related conditions. It was a little complicated to unpack, but there's something called Nocturia. There's something called Polyuria. There's something called nocturnal polyuria. So it all gets a little bit complicated. But she said this is something that people are searching for. Would you like to write a few articles? And I was not that familiar with the term, so I needed to go and look it up a little bit for myself first. But then I accepted the assignment. So from there, my process usually on accepting an assignment is to kind of draft a very rough outline for what the article is going to look like. And a lot of that will come from the editor, letting me know what the publication wants to include. And then I will take a look online and I'll do some research to see what information I can find through my own credible sources on the internet and what I really need to have medical experts speak to. And then I'll start reaching out to contacts, start trying to find doctors, other relevant experts. It depends on the topic. Sometimes that can be psychologists and social workers and things like that. For this one, it was primarily urologists. And I'll do phone interviews or email interviews with them and ask them the things that I need more clarity on, that I really want confirmed information on rather than just looking it up on the internet. And then it's just a matter of putting the article together almost like a puzzle, taking what I've learned myself. Sometimes it's a topic that I have personal experience with, so sometimes I can add that in. This time it wasn't, but sometimes it is. And just sort of figuring out how to piece the credible internet sources and the facts and information I found there with the expert quotes and information that I've gotten from those interviews.
So your process sounds a lot like mine, and I find it's not difficult to find researchers and physicians and other people who are willing to talk on these topics. So I don't think, do you agree with me? You don't have to be a doctor to present credible information?
I don't think so. It's not difficult. I would agree with that. I think that there's definitely it's a very symbiotic relationship between the health journalists and the medical experts, and that, we need them and we rely on them to give us accurate information. But they also usually are looking for media opportunities as well. So I found that it really, you're helping each other. And I don't find it that difficult to source experts willing to talk to me. And I think that as long as you have a lot of attention to detail, and you know where to look for those credible internet sources, and you get these doctors to give you some information. I don't think that you have to be a doctor to present the credible information or to present a credible article. Now, I would never give medical advice, and I would hope no one would ever read one of my articles and use it in the place of medical information or medical advice from a doctor. But I do think that with a certain amount of journalistic kind of know-how and the help of experts, that you can present accurate information in a way that's relatable to an audience.
Yeah, I think you touched on several things there. Make it relatable, not a lot of medical terms unless it's absolutely necessary. And I agree with you that we're not here to give medical advice, but information to help you form opinions and ask questions and ask better questions to the doctor. So just going back to this article, what causes me to be getting up to pee at night? What do I need to know about Nocturia?
So Nocturia is having the urge to use the bathroom more frequently at night. Now, what I learned, again, I had said I didn't know a lot about this topic going into it. I learned a tremendous amount. And one of the main things I learned is that there's a similar condition called polyuria, where you also have to urinate frequently. But the difference between nocturia and polyuria is that with nocturia, you feel the urge to use the bathroom more frequently, in this case at night, but you're not always necessarily having a more volume of urine. You're not always necessarily filling your bladder and needing to actually void a higher volume of urine. That happens with polyuria. We often see polyuria with other medical conditions like hypertension or cardiovascular problems. We see it with diabetes. Any of the conditions that actually cause you to have a higher output of urine can cause polyuria. Nocturia can be caused by everything from overactive bladder to just an enlarged prostate. It's a much more common condition in people who are aging, and just having kind of general issues with their urology, sort of that part of your body. But they're related and they cause sort of similar problems, but they're not often coming from the same source or happening for the same reason.
Do you find that different publications have different standards that you have to adhere to? Are some just tougher, stricter, more careful about the information than others?
Yes, definitely. I would say that even the ones who are less stringent are still being careful and are still making a good effort to present accurate information. But they all do have different levels of standards for that. Sometimes I have to provide a source or a cited source for every single factual piece of information in the article, including what a doctor has said, including a doctor's quotations. That's sort of the highest level, I think, in some ways. And then other times I just have to hyperlink where I got the information from. Sometimes I have to provide a works cited list. Other times it's just in linking right into the article. Sometimes the articles are, as I said before, medically reviewed. And other times I think they're just fact checked. I would say that I think ever since COVID, I feel pretty comfortable saying that the standards have gotten higher for publications. And I mean, that could be coincidence, but it seems to me like it probably is also an intentional shift towards putting the most accurate information as possible out there, not just about COVID, but about other things as well.
Yeah, that's kind of interesting, isn't it? That we've seen just a lot of misinformation and what health officials said, they've now contradicted, I guess, as this whole thing has moved along and rolled along, right? I mean, at first we shouldn't be wearing masks, now we should, and just, I can cite a number of different circumstances where the information's gone backwards. And so those of us who are in that business kind of are at a disadvantage of we report what the officials tell us, And then that proves
Right.
to be wrong a little bit later on. You did a piece that also caught my attention simply because it's about nutrition. And I watch that a lot. You know, health and nutrition is one of the things that we can control, right? And nutrition affects our health so dramatically. And I was looking the other day at the oat milk that was in my refrigerator, wanted to know more. And lo and behold, look what I found. Another Sarah Bradley article on oat milk. What can you tell me about oat milk?
So oat milk is not inherent. My takeaway from the article was that oat milk is not inherently good or bad for you. It's kind of dietarily neutral in a sense. I think the biggest takeaways that I got from researching that article are that you get a little bit more of some things in oat milk, like fiber and possibly a little bit more protein. But you also get a little bit of less of things than you do with cow's milk, like all of the fortified nutrients that are often added into regular cow's milk that you buy at the grocery store, you know, vitamins A and D. Usually oat milk is not fortified in the same way. So if that's something that you need in your diet, you want to pay attention to that. And the vast majority, not all, but the vast majority of oat milk sold at just general grocery stores contains a lot of sugar, a lot of added sugar. So you can find oat milk that does not, but you have to be very careful. You can't just automatically grab a pint of oat milk and think that you're making a healthier choice. You actually may be taking in more sugar than you would if you had cow's milk. So you've got to read the labels. That's a big thing I've learned in the years that I've been writing about diet and nutrition is you've got to read the labels. You can't just assume because something says it's part of a diet trend or because it's an alternative option that it's necessarily healthier. The biggest takeaway I think from that particular article was that drinking oat milk is probably a really good choice if you can't drink cow's milk, but the vast majority of dietitians probably would not tell random folks to switch to oat milk if they have no issue drinking cow's milk.
Yeah, so just in the case of this particular article on Eat This, Not That, there are some best oat milks to buy. Was that something that you contributed to, or is that something that you were not involved in?
No, that was me. I was involved in that process. Usually I frequently will write what we call product roundups, either for Eat This, Not That. I do it often for Very Well Health as well, sort of their commerce articles. And that is something that I'm usually responsible for as the writer. And so I know for sure with the oat milk article that I did ask the dietitians I interviewed for suggestions, product recommendations. Are there oat milks you tell your clients to drink if they're interested in doing that? Or sometimes I'll offer up a couple different brands and say, can you rate these or rank these in terms of best to worst based on the nutritional information? So that is something that I do. I try to do it as much as possible with input from the experts that I'm relying on for that piece, just so that they can kind of support my interpretation of it.
So those manufacturers were not involved. They didn't pay to get that ranking, nothing like that.
Nope. I don't. I frequently, after these articles go live, will get manufacturers of similar products saying, hey, maybe you could include mine next time. So that's a common thing after the fact. But no, that's just me doing research, trying to find what the best options are based on, again, what those experts have told me. So if they've said you've got to stay under a certain number of grams of sugar, then I'll only include oat milks that meet that criteria, essentially.
But there are some sites and there are some listings that are actually paid that way. How do we know the difference? Yeah,
usually there's some sort of notation about a product being sponsored. And I think that's mandatory. I'm not 100% sure that they're required to do that. But typically there is some sort of notation, and you'll see that on Instagram quite a bit. And I don't know how active, sort of you or your audience is on Instagram, but it's something I see all the time. I'll see someone that I follow on Instagram all of a sudden promoting or saying, oh, I got this product and it's great. And then, you kind of scroll down and you're like, oh, this is a sponsored post, which is fine. If they, that's part of how they make a living. And if they are, as long as they're giving honest opinions and feedback about it, that's fine. But usually you are required to make some sort of notation to the reader that it has been sponsored.
So we cover a lot of health topics around here, and I know you do as well, obviously, over many years. What seems to have risen to a level that you've adopted it in your own life?
That's a good question. I mean, again, I think I wrote so intensely about diet trends for a couple of years, and I've been enjoying the break, the hiatus from that, because I really was inundated for a long time with articles about diet trends, whether it was debunking trends or asking experts what they thought about things like keto or, no carb or the carnivore diet, or, I mean, there's just a million of them out there. It really opened my eyes to a lot of things about those diets and the fact that they really are generally not supported or encouraged or endorsed by the experts in the field, whether that's dietitians or whether that's, weight management physicians or bariatric surgeons. Most of them would really prefer for the majority of people that they count calories, that they manage their caloric intake, that they make generally smart decisions in terms of how much food they eat in a day, and also what types of food they eat. Whole foods. I don't know how many times I've heard the whole foods argument. I think rightfully so. So rather than processed foods, choosing foods that are not really turned into other things.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I heard so much of that I think at this point you'd really have to push me to do a diet really per se. Anything that falls under the category of a diet, I think I would be very resistant to doing, because I just have not heard from the experts that the evidence is there to support them. Sometimes they're downright dangerous, especially if you're, a certain population, and that they don't work. Or they might work in the short term, but they don't work in the long term. And I've heard more than one dietitian say that a diet that does not work in the long term is not a diet that's worth you doing. Because eventually you're going to fall off the wagon again. And what have you really learned in a sense about your own body, really?
One that has passed that muster for me, though, is intermittent fasting and the Mediterranean diet. The head of the American College of Cardiologists, we featured him here on the program, and he specifically said when you combine intermittent fasting with the Mediterranean diet, that's about as healthy as you can get. So that one sticks for me.
Yeah.
But I'm with you. There are a million different diet fads out there, and it's tough to know what's real. Anything else that you've adopted in your life as a result of all your work?
Not too much. I mean, I have a couple of health conditions myself, and none of them are very serious, but I've learned a lot about managing some of those health conditions through some of the articles that I've written. But in general, it's the diet, it's basic things, right? Like hydrating, which sounds so simple, sounds like such a no-brainer. But hydrating, sleeping, managing stress. I mean, every doctor I've ever talked to about nearly any topic, I mean, not so much, really serious health conditions. Those need to be managed more carefully. But the basic stuff that we all deal with, whether it's weight gain or trying to maintain weight, whether it's headaches and insomnia or digestive problems, just the basic things that we all struggle with to some degree. Most doctors, in addition to kind of specific suggestions they might make for that problem, will tell you have to drink water, you have to eat whole, healthy foods, you have to sleep at night, and you have to manage your stress.
Yeah, it's all about the basics. It comes back to that, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I've enjoyed our conversation. I hope that we'll have you back in the future, maybe talk about some of your other articles, information you've learned, and share that with the audience as well. That is Sarah Bradley. She is a freelance author. You've read her in a number of different websites, and you may not have known it, but I'm sure you have. Sarah, thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.